Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with the Codex. My name is Dot Porter. I am a curator in the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a unit in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts in the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. Once a week, on Thursday at noon Eastern Time, I take a book or a part of a book off the shelf and just do an informal show and tell. If this is your first time, welcome. I love to see new folks here, and it is quite informal, so use the chat if you have any questions. I will keep my eyes on the chat. My coworker, colleague Amy Hutchins is here. She is our manuscripts cataloging librarian, and she is incredibly knowledgeable, and she can also answer questions. So don't hesitate to do that. Brian asked a question in the chat right before we started. He said, never mind, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. He wants to know when the whole Coffee with the Codex started. This started in January of 2021 when I came back to the library after being on lockdown for most of 2020, and I wanted to get my hands on books, and I knew a lot of people were not able to get into libraries and were not able to look at books, and so they said I could come back one day a week, and I said, if I'm going to come back one day a week, I'm going to make it worth my time. And that's when I started Coffee with the Codex, and it's just been so popular that we keep going. I didn't record the first year, so if you go to the YouTube playlist, you'll see that it goes all the way back to 2022, but not 21, because I was shy the first year, and then I just decided I'm not shy anymore. So there you go. Now you know. All right, now we're going to get started. Today we're looking at fragments of books of hours, which is great because it gives me a chance to talk about two things that I love, one of which is books of hours, and the other one is fragments. And both of these are much bigger than what we can cover in the time we have today, but I'll do my best. So to start, books of hours. We've looked at books of hours before. If you go again to our YouTube channel and you search for books of hours, you'll find some recordings, multiple recordings of different books of hours. Very briefly, the Book of Hours was a genre of prayer book that was very popular in the medieval West. So particularly in France and England, in, the Netherlands, also not so much, I think, in Spain. Oh, also Italy. So those areas, it was very popular. And it was sort of designed around a text called the Hours of the Virgin, which is where you get the phrase Book of Hours. It refers to this Hours of the Virgin. And the Hours of the Virgin is a set of daily prayers that were modeled on the canonical hours, which is what you did if you were a monk or a nun living in a monastery. There would be a bell that would wake you up very early in the morning, and you'd go to chapel and say some prayers, and then you'd go out and work, and then you'd come back a few hours later. And you do this throughout the day. And so the Hours of the Virgin reflect this practice, only they were made for lay people, so people who were not living in a monastery. They tended to be very beautiful. They could be quite expensive. If you've only heard of one Book of Hours, you've probably heard of the Tres Riches. My French is terrible, but the Tres Riches Hours, which is probably the most highly decorated one. And it was recently on exhibit, actually, in Paris, maybe, I know in France, because I had friends who went to see it. So very, very popular. It also contained a lot of other prayers that could vary from book to book. And they tend to survive both in whole and in fragments. And so what we're going to be looking at today is pieces of books of hours that survive. And we'll talk about why they do. So I'm actually not starting with this one. This was just so you had something to look at while I was talking. I'm going to move this aside. And while I do, Brian in the chat, I didn't know this, in Eastern / Central Europe, it was also popular and known as Horologion. It's an Orthodox book of hours. So that is new to me. Thank you for that. So I'm going to start with this leaf here. And this is MS Coll 591, folder 10. So MS Coll, that's Manuscript Collection 591. This is boxes of fragments. It's just a whole bunch of boxes with folders that have things like this in it. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So this is folder 10, and this is, let me find the record. Here we go. This is a Book of Hours leaf, dated to France in the 1400s. This contains prayers from the Hours of the Virgin. So this is actually part of that. And we know it's the Hours of the Virgin because, right, these texts, they're the same or at least very similar from book to book. So if you found a leaf like this somewhere and you didn't know what it was, you could search a little bit of the text and probably figure out what it is. That's how we figure out what these are. Let's see, written in a Gothic textualis semi-quadratic script in France in the 15th century. It looked like, if you look at a Book of Hours, you'd be like, yeah, that looks like a Book of Hours. So it has pretty large margins, very nice, creamy parchment, sort of a pretty decorative margin here, kind of leaves that are coming out of the initials. This is a pretty common style of art that we see in Books of Hours. Let's see. Oh, Tina is asking about the size of pages. So you can see it's quite small, and the size is going to be in the record. So this is 14 by 11 centimeters. So not big. And most of these are not going to be large because Books of Hours were generally made to be carried with you. They were made to be portable because you might want to do a prayer in the middle of the day, and so you want to have it with you there. So I'll turn it over. Actually, I'll take it out because this is a little bit shiny here. So we'll take it out of that. And so here it is. And you can see those initials. There's a little bit of gold. Very pretty. Now imagine if you were outside, right? You're outside and it's a sunny day and you get to take these out. I'm going to see if I can, let's see. Boop. All right. So now we turn it over. Now this is the verso side. That is the back side of the page. And I know that because when it's like this, the decoration is going to be no, you know what? I'm totally lying. I don't know that. I think it is. No, here we go. This is the front. So here again, we have this sort of ivy decoration here. And let's see, you're going to see on this side, there is a kind of strip of color. And Mathilde is a step ahead of me in the chat. She said, is that glue? Yes, this is glue, because this, before we got this and took it off of whatever it was on, this would have been glued onto something, and the way you would have seen it is it would have been like this, and then you sort of it's glued and you can sort of flip it over like that. So why is this a leaf? Why is this a leaf and not something else? And I'll show you an example of what I mean by something else in a minute. Because Books of Hours, as I say, like, they're very pretty, there's gold and there's color. And so they can sometimes be cut apart and the leaves taken out and sold individually, because if you are a bookseller, you can make more money selling individual leaves than you can selling an entire book. Which is sad but true, and there are booksellers who will do this. Even today, we have specific examples of people buying books and then later selling the leaves. It is, Brian says it's a sin. It is not. It is frowned upon. Like, no, I would not buy a leaf that I knew was cut out of a book like this, but it does happen. And this is a remnant of that practice over here. So this is one example, a little 15th century leaf, but it does survive, which is kind of nice. So let's put this. I'll put this back in the Mylar folder. There we go. And then I'm going to show you a different kind of fragment, just as an example of how else these things can go. So this one it's not in your list. This is folder 5. MS Coll 591, folder 5. This is a leaf. It's a commentary on Exodus. And so it looks a little bit different. There's text in the center. We won't pay attention too much to the content, because what I want you to notice is the shape of this. The shape is kind of odd, right? Like it's been cut. The corners have been cut here, and there are folds. It's been folded here, and there's a fold here, and then again at the top. And then there's some folds going on here. So this leaf was not placed, it was not cut out carefully and put in a folder or glued to something so you could look at it. Mathilde, again, you are one step ahead of me. It was used for a binding. This was a leaf that was not otherwise being used, and so it was taken, and you can imagine a book. Here's the spine. Here's where it was folded around the bindings, or the boards, and actually I think this is the side that faced outside because it's more worn. If we go back and look at the other side, this is quite a lot cleaner, and this side is more dirty. The ink has worn off, particularly on the spine, and I think there's something that was written here in ink that is really hard to see, but I think that's a number. So this would have faced out, and this is the number of the manuscript in whoever's collection that was. So it was to keep, Brian is asking how it can help in binding. It was basically to just cover the boards, to keep the boards from wearing off. And there's lots of other, this is just one example of what we call binding waste. Of how manuscripts were used in bindings. There were also, you also find like very small pieces that are glued in various ways into the structure of the binding. This is just a really good example to kind of show how that was used. So a different kind, and you don't tend to see books of hours and other sort of decorated manuscripts used like this, because they would have been too expensive, too beautiful, used otherwise. I'm sure they exist. I've never seen them. But parchment, reusing parchment was, as some people are saying in the chat, it was used to save money because you didn't have to buy new parchment or leather to cover your book. You could just reuse an old thing you weren't using anyway. And parchment's quite strong. So it was a really good way to sort of keep your boards safe. It makes me think about when I was in school and we had book covers that we made from like paper bags that you got at the grocery store, like that. Oh yeah, a couple of people in the chat are saying that too. Yep, kind of like that. Okay, let's keep going with books of hours because they're so pretty. All right, so that was folder 10 was the first one. And this next one is folder 23. Let's see. 23. And this is a little different. This is a bifolium from the 1400s. So a bifolium is two leaves that are connected. It's basically the parchment sheet. And then it's folded to make two leaves. But here you can see how it looks when you take it out, and then you've got holes here from where it was sewn. This is I love this because it lets you get an idea of the structure that is really hard to get otherwise. So this is also Book of Hours. Let me see what the text is. Not vellum, non-consecutive bifolium. It includes portions from the Gospel lesson from Matthew and the Matins of the Office of the Virgin. So this is kind of interesting because non-consecutive means that in the book, these two leaves were not facing each other, that there were other leaves that were stacked between them. And so you have the Matthew, I don't know if this is the Matthew part, but you've got, 2 leaves of Matthew. And then in between, you have the Office of the Virgin starting, and then you have the next 2 leaves here. And you can see somebody made a mistake. They were cutting things up, and they, I guess, accidentally made a cut here that they didn't mean to. But it's still very nice. And even though this is a little bit more worn than the first one, there is some illumination here. This is a little gold initial with blue, and then we've got the blue and the red. I always talk about the blue and the red. Amy is pointing out the rubric Secundum Matteum. Secundum Matteum. So this is the second Matthew there. And then let's flip this over and see what's on the other side. So this is the back page of the Office of the Virgin, or the Hours of the Virgin. And this is the front page of the Secundum Matteum. So there we go, another example. And here again, we have these little things here. This is again remnants of when it would have been glued inside some kind of folder. And it's always glued on the edges like this so you can see both sides. The same way, sometimes they're framed in glass frames, and often there's glass on both sides, so you can see both sides. Although if you had one, let's say this leaf was by itself, and there's this illuminated initial on the front, and there's nothing on the back, you might say, well, I don't really care about this because it's not pretty, so we can put it in a frame with just glass on the front. But I like both sides. I think it's very cool. All right, so that is folder 23. Come on. 23. And then folder 24. Let's see, Brian, I don't understand your question. Are you asking about the gluing that's used to glue it into, it would be like gluing it onto a piece of cardboard so you can see it versus sewing it into a book. So it would have been sewed originally, but then it's glued there. Okay, oh, this one. So this is folder 24. Folder 24. This is another leaf from France in the 1400s. There were a lot of books of hours made in France in the 1400s. This one side contains a prayer to Saint Sebastian, and I'm not sure what the other side is. The record doesn't say, but I think that this is the Saint Sebastian one? Okay, this is very cool. First of all, it's got a little illuminated initial, or an initial that used to be illuminated, but the gold has worn off. So there's a little bit, but it's mostly worn, and there's a little, this one is not quite as fancy as some of the other ones we've seen. What this does have is a little bit of text that was added later. Oop. So I'm looking particularly at this blue heading. That is not, at least the first word, I don't think. That the last 2 words. Now I'm saying this, and maybe I'm wrong. What do you think, Amy? The heading in blue is French. Ah, maybe that's why it looks different. Do you think this is contemporary? Is this original? Or is it added? I think it's the M. Yeah. I think maybe it's just that the M looks weird to me. But it could be not later. However, I noticed when we turned it over that there is a much later thing that has been added here, and I don't know what that text is, but it's a little prayer. It's in Latin, added later. Amy is saying that the one at front is probably a slightly different script because it's vernacular, and that's what's throwing me off. You often see that in manuscripts that have both Latin and another, like a vernacular language. They use different scripts to differentiate them. And you see them a lot in French manuscripts. Now, there was a question earlier who asked it. Tina, was commenting on the size of the margins, because this parchment or vellum, like fine parchment, is so expensive. And yes, so the reason the margins are so big, or I guess one of the potential reasons, is that if you had money, you could afford it. It's sort of a sign of a very expensive fine book, because sometimes you'll see books on parchment that are like absolutely full to the brim because you want to use less parchment because you want to save money. This is saying I can afford this. Really, it's very nice parchment here. So that is indeed what's happening. This is there's a purpose to it. There. All right. Okay, we have confirmation from Lisa in Paris that the blue is French on here, that this is French, and then the rest is Latin. All right. Amazing. Okay, so that is folder 24, and we'll put this away. And we still have several more to go, so I'm gonna go a little bit faster maybe. So this is folder 27. Oh, this looks different. I like this. And I went ahead and took that out. So folder 27, what is happening with this one? This is another Book of Hours leaf. This is also French, but it's written in a larger script, and takes up a little bit more of the space, right? We don't have quite as large margins here. We still have a little decoration. We've got red and blue. Red and blue alternating is very common. A little decoration that sort of fills out the line there. And then this one doesn't have any illumination. Yes, this is Latin. Most of this is going to be in Latin. Did I say French? This is Latin. Yep. So does it say what? The text is from the Office of the Dead, containing Psalm 49 through 14. So the script, we're talking about the script. So I don't know what yes, I don't, like, thinking about the economy, I don't know because a larger text takes up more space. It could be that it was, Mathilde, you keep doing this. She says maybe the owner had bad sight. And that could be that. So these books were made on spec, basically. You would go to a place and say, I want a Book of Hours. So it's entirely possible that someone said, my old Book of Hours, I can no longer read it. Get me one with larger script. That actually makes a lot of sense to me. So there. Oh, so the confusion, I said French because it's in France, from France, right? It was written in France, not in French. There we go. So that's that one, another pretty one, folder 27. And then folder 32. Oh, this is delightful. This is very nice. Everybody get ready. A little bit different of a style here. Let's see, zoom in a little bit. Oop. Yes, we have some hard eyes in the chat. So this is very nice. This one has a lot of gold that's sort of intricate. There's little dots of gold out in the margins, and then obviously that initial. And then instead of the earlier ones we looked at had sort of vine decoration, which is a common type. And then this is another common type in France, that sort of the whole margin is full of decoration. And clearly this would be a little more costly to have made. This is made in France, again, probably Paris, around the year 1400, so maybe a little bit earlier than the other ones we've been looking at. Gospel reading from Mark, followed by the beginning of the prayer Obsecro Te, and that's what this is, the O, Obsecro Te. is a prayer that you pretty much always find in a Book of Hours. There, we'll take a look at the other side here. So this is really common to see, where when you have a text that's starting here with an initial, then you get the marginal decoration, and then on the next page there's none, because it's just text, and this is pretty, see there. All right. Mathilde, is there a correlation between how fancy they are and how thin the vellum is? I can say they all pretty much all have nice vellum. This one is very, very thin. This is really probably the nicest one, and it's also the fanciest decoration. So I think generally you would find, yes, that is true. Someone is asking, why is the type in red, some of it in red? It's called a rubric, and it's sort of, it's usually something it's designed to sort of mark it out as some kind of header. Yeah, so, or a word to bring your attention to, a little bit like a highlight maybe. John Black says typically as guidance or direction, RE content/reading. So that's why that is. All right, great. And then one more leaf, and then I have two other things I'm going to show you just very quickly, because not all fragments are leaves. Okay, this is fun. This is a later one. This is a printed Book of Hours. So Books of Hours continued to be popular into the past the rise of the printing press, and you do see we have a couple of printed Books of Hours in our collection. This one says 1490s ? Printed in France, probably Paris. It's penitential psalms, Psalm 101, and then the first two verses of Psalm 129. So that's what's here. So the text, the black text, is printed, and then everything else has been added basically by a scribe. It's like a scribe adding things to a printed text. And so we've got the marginal decoration, which would be similar to a marginal decoration that you'd see in other Books of Hours, and then the initials are added and the line fillers are added. And again, here is, here at the top, that line of glue. So we know that this at a later date was put in some kind of binding where you could look at both sides of it if you wanted to. All right. So that is that. And then the two things I wanted to show you just very quickly. Sometimes, yes, Matilda, it was on paper. That one was on paper, not on parchment. Although there are sometimes printed things like that are printed on vellum, but that one, or on parchment, and that one. So this one is MS Codex 1625, which is the Gospel Lessons for the Office of the Dead, use of Chartres. So this is just a section, not a leaf, but a little section that was taken from a Book of Hours, which was written in France around 1390, so a little bit earlier than what we've been looking at. 6 conjugate folios, which means that they go in order, so you could read all 6 of them all the way through. Written lessons from the Gospel of Luke and Mark, and an abbreviated version of the Passion from the Gospel of John. They originally followed the Office of the Dead. And the rest of the manuscript was there. Oh, did it say parchment? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just thought it was paper. Oh, no. Tori, you are correct. It was parchment. I was wrong. I was thinking of something else. This one is also on parchment here. I know we're a little over, but you can leave if you need to. I'm gonna finish off because I want to show you the last one. So this also looks, conjugate folios. It means that they follow each other. So this is page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so if it was not conjugate, it would be like if we took just this sheet which would be this page and this page out. Instead of choir, it could be a choir or part of a choir. It's only 6 leaves. And I would expect the original choir would have 8 leaves. So that's why, and I think it's specifying that sometimes when things are fragmented, they get out of order as well. So it's a nice way to say these leaves are in order. So that's what it is. Okay. So sometimes we have sections like that. And then there's just one more that's another section, and then we'll be done. This is MS Codex 681. A little bit bigger, but they're all pretty small. And this is fragment of a book of hours written in a French script with the use of sarum, which is the English use. And it opens with this gorgeous initial and the decorated leaves. So this one, John, I think you were asking about the conjugate leaves. This one is misbound, so this is out of order. It's essentially a bunch of pretty leaves, right? So we have that initial, and it has this little miniature there. William is asking, did they ever number the leaves? So they did not number leaves. We number leaves. Amy, when we get new books, if they don't already have numbers in them, Amy will take a pencil and put little numbers in there, which is really helpful for us, for me, as I'm sort of paging through it. Let's see, anything else? Brian is asking, why is there no marginalia? There is very rarely marginalia in books of hours. They were not the kinds of books that people normally wrote in. Although here is a later, you do see like later things. Somebody's noting the Te Deum starts here, and these kinds of things. So we're over time. I'm so sorry, but I really wanted to show this one to you. Lots of fragments and things. Lisa is asking about intact bifolia, and this one I am not sure. I assume so, but they may just be individual leaves bound together. It's hard to tell. All right, we are now done. Thank you all so much for coming today. I hope I'll see you again next week, and everybody have a great week.